It begins the way most dangerous things do, not with a warning, not with a headline, not even with a scream. It begins as a whisper. You're scrolling in the dead hours of the night, your eyes blurring from the glow of the screen, when you see it. A word you've never seen before. A word that doesn't belong. Whishdom. No explanation. No definition. Just dropped into the middle of a conversation like a glitch in language itself. You think nothing of it at first. Just another typo, another nonsense handle left behind by a bored user. But it stays with you. The shape of the word lingers in your mind the way a dream does hours after waking. Fragmented, unfinished, but heavy, like it's asking to be remembered. And then you notice something. When people use the word, they never explain it. They reference it as if everyone already knows what it means. And when someone asks directly, the thread goes silent. Replies vanish. Accounts deactivate. It's like throwing a rock into a lake and watching the ripples. Only this lake swallows the stone whole. On Reddit, Whishdom appears in fragments. A comment under a conspiracy post, a cryptic reply to a UFO sighting, a throwaway line under r/nosleep. One user described it as the story that follows you, before the comment was deleted less than an hour later. Those who managed to read it claimed they received strange direct messages within the day. Stop digging. Close your eyes. Forget the word. The kind of warnings that don't sound like warnings, but ultimatums. There are similarities, of course. Folklore has always warned us about cursed objects, books you're not meant to read, films that can't be watched without consequence. The King in Yellow. The Blair Witch Tape. But Whishdom feels different. There is no media to consume, no obvious object to blame. It's not a book. Not a movie. Not even a thread you can point to. It's just a story, but not one you read. A story you fall into. A story that seems to fall into you. Archive hunters discovered an obscure Usenet thread from 1998. Buried among corrupted text files was the word spelled slightly differently, Whishdom. A single line stood intact, like it had been waiting. Whishdom is a story that doesn't end, but eats. No username attached. No replies. Just the phrase, sitting in digital rot for decades. The unsettling part? The thread itself showed signs of corruption only where the word appeared. Lines of gibberish, scrambled characters, white space where text should be. As if whatever was written there couldn't survive being preserved. And yet, people keep stumbling across it. Twitter threads appear late at night, only to vanish the next morning. Reddit comments appear, then self-destruct before moderators can intervene. Even in private Discord chats, users claim to see the word appear in conversations where no one typed it. Some laugh it off as a meme or an ARG. Others describe the same gnawing paranoia, the sense that simply reading the word lodges it inside you, like a splinter you can't remove. This is the hook of Whishdom. Not a scream in the night, but a slow tightening in the chest. Curiosity disguised as dread. The more you try to look away, the more the word insists on returning. You begin to wonder if you noticed it or if it noticed you. Whether you searched for it, or whether the story has been waiting for you all along. And then comes the silence. The moment you realize you're still thinking about it, still shaping the word in your mouth though you've never spoken it aloud. That's when the fear changes. It's no longer about what Whishdom is, but what it's already done to you. Because the moment you hear its name, the story has already started. It always begins with the smallest traces, little breadcrumbs scattered across the endless sprawl of the internet. Isolated comments, fragments of whispers, a word buried in a thread no one remembers posting. But when you connect them, the shape that emerges is not random. It is deliberate. It is waiting. The Whishdom stories appear like warning signals before something slips through the cracks. People vanishing quietly, abandoning their accounts, their routines, their lives. Friends insist they simply changed. But there are no goodbyes, no final posts, no footprints to follow. Only silence, vast and unbroken, as though the story itself demanded a price for being named. One account still haunts the archives. A Redditor claimed his roommate had become consumed with finding the last Whishdom post. For weeks he muttered about how it must exist somewhere, how it had to be hidden in layers no one had peeled back yet. He stopped eating. He stopped talking. His screen glowed in the dark long after midnight, the name Whishdom scribbled in his notebook margins over and over. Then one day he was gone. His wallet left on the desk. His keys untouched. His phone buzzing with unread messages. The door was left unlocked, the apartment silent. The post describing his disappearance lasted less than 12 hours before being scrubbed, leaving only screenshots passed from hand to hand like contraband. The roommate never resurfaced. On Twitter, the patterns repeat. Threads unraveling in real time, people warning about Whishdom as though it were not a story but a threshold, a door you are never meant to open. Witnesses describe the same rhythm, a chilling first tweet, a few cryptic replies, then silence. Entire threads vanish within minutes, the accounts either deactivated or stripped clean as if they never existed. No trace in the cached results. No record in the archives. Only those who happen to see the words in that short window insist it was real. The rest dismiss it as a ghost memory of the feed. Even the government's files are not immune. Through FOIA requests, fragments have surfaced buried in technical jargon, references to something called pattern chatter inside fringe digital subcultures. Harmless phrases flagged as anomalous by counterintelligence algorithms, phrases that did not match any known movement but spread with enough consistency to trigger red alerts. The files list Whishdom under a vague label, esoteric influence narratives. No elaboration. No context. Just enough to suggest that someone, somewhere, considered it dangerous enough to monitor. Like a storm cloud forming on the edge of their radar. The pages are half-redacted, the meaning gutted, but the unease bleeds through the black ink. Independent researchers digging into these anomalies noticed something stranger. A barely sociable, style deep dive traced dozens of usernames tied to Whishdom mentions across platforms. At first, they seemed like random throwaways. But each handle was linked, by buried registration data, to old email accounts. Not Gmail. Not Yahoo. Hotmail addresses, untouched since the late 90s. Accounts long abandoned, locked, inaccessible. Dead inboxes leading nowhere. Digital tombstones. And yet they all pointed back to Whishdom. As though the story had been here longer than the platforms themselves. It begins to feel less like people are following a mystery and more like the mystery is following them. The vanishings don't scatter at random. They echo with a rhythm, people spiraling into obsession, muttering about final posts, last fragments, unfinished stories. They stop showing up. They leave rooms empty. They are replaced by shadows in the memories of their friends, who swear the person who came back wasn't the same as the one who left. Changed in ways they couldn't explain, as if the original had been hollowed out and replaced with something that only looked human. The paranoia grows with each connection. Because obsession does not feel like a choice in this story. It feels engineered. The posts, the vanishings, the purges, they aren't simply consequences of digging too deep. They feel designed to pull you in, like bait dangling on a hook. You think you're searching for Whishdom, but the question gnaws in the back of your mind. What if Whishdom is already searching for you? What if the danger of Whishdom isn't in reading it, but in realizing that it has already begun to read you? Not a story you encounter, but a story that encounters you, slipping into your thoughts, threading itself into your dreams, until you can no longer tell where your own memories end and Whishdom begins. Survivors, if that word even applies, don't describe it as fiction. They describe it as infection. A virus hidden in narrative form, wearing the mask of a story, designed to bypass defenses and nest inside the brain. Psychologists who've studied fragments speculate that Whishdom exploits the same cognitive machinery that makes us crave stories in the first place. The mind is wired to seek patterns, to find closure, to fill in gaps until chaos feels like order. But Whishdom weaponizes that need. It dangles unfinished arcs, impossible riddles, contradictions too sharp to ignore, until the brain, desperate for resolution, begins bending reality itself to close the loop. You don't choose to keep reading. The story chooses you. Those who've brushed against it speak in terms that are more chemical than literary. They call it autocatalytic, a story that feeds on the act of being remembered. Once a fragment lands in your mind, it multiplies, grafting itself onto the scaffolding of your own past. You begin recalling events that never happened, faces you've never met, conversations that play like echoes of something you once dreamed. And slowly, you wonder if your history is being rewritten line by line, not by memory, but by wishdom itself. The paranoia deepens when the dreams begin. Users admit, often with visible fear, that sleep becomes serialized. Night after night, they dream not of random chaos, but of continuing episodes. A season unfolding, scenes that pick up exactly where the last dream left off. Characters that return. Locations that grow more detailed with each visit. Entire arcs that demand attention, weaving through their subconscious as though wishdom is directing the script. Nexpo-style accounts are filled with trembling confessions. I woke up in the middle of the episode and couldn't tell if I was interrupting it, or if it was interrupting me. An archived blog from 2006 adds another layer, one that makes the whispers even darker. Buried on a forgotten site, it described wishdom not as myth, but as a story net, a mesh of recursive narratives supposedly woven during abandoned psychological operations. Military experiments meant to test how stories could alter identity, influence populations, collapse reality tunnels. The blog insisted that fragments of those experiments leaked into the wild, untethered, evolving. Whether the author was delusional or dangerously informed is unclear. The site disappeared weeks after it was found, its archive riddled with broken links and corrupted files. And here lies the emotional core of the terror. You don't just consume wishdom. Wishdom consumes you. The words don't sit harmlessly on a screen, they climb inside, colonizing thought. You begin to feel less like a reader and more like a character. A pawn being written, nudged, shaped. Every choice, every hesitation, every haunting doubt. Was it ever yours, or was it seeded long before you noticed? The fear is not that wishdom is unfinished. The fear is that wishdom is finishing you. Every pursuit of wishdom eventually collides with silence. You dig, you search, you scroll deeper into the archives, and then, nothing. Threads vanish overnight. Accounts go dark, usernames replaced with placeholders. Videos that dared to mention the word are demonetized, stripped from feeds, or erased entirely, leaving only the hollow echo of comments asking what happened. Each deletion feels too precise, too immediate, to be explained as coincidence. And yet the fragments remain, just enough to prove the purge is happening, just enough to hint that something or someone wants the story scattered into pieces no one can fully assemble. Declassified files cast the first shadow of intent. DARPA projects once explored the manipulation of culture through narrative infection, the idea that stories could be built like viruses, engineered to replicate through human thought, to override willpower and spread without detection. Across the ocean, the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations was rumored to have conducted similar experiments, testing how stories could break down identity, destabilize groups, and fracture belief systems. Both institutions deny these programs ever existed. But in the files that slip through the cracks, the language is chillingly familiar: self-propagating myth structures, cognitive contagions, esoteric influence narratives. And then there are the archives, the traces that prove something was there. On archive.org, links that once contained wishdom discussions now lead only to broken placeholders, or worse, advertisements for irrelevant products, as though reality itself is being overwritten. Snapshots collapse into static. Threads freeze into nonsense strings. Pages redirect to corners of the internet that feel wrong, like a stage curtain hastily pulled down to hide what stood behind it. A few users claim they've preserved backups, but when asked to produce them, their accounts have already vanished. Even the algorithms seem complicit. Analysts whisper that platforms have quietly trained filters to recognize and scrub wishdom-related language before it can spread. The evidence comes in patterns too consistent to ignore: posts flagged without explanation, tags instantly buried, videos disappearing without violating visible guidelines. The why files style speculation suggests that what we think of as content moderation may actually be a covert quarantine system. Programs designed not to protect the public from dangerous information, but to stop us from piecing together a narrative we were never meant to finish. The parallels to forbidden folklore are impossible to ignore. The King in Yellow, a play so cursed it was banned not for its plot, but for the effect it had on readers. Whispered stories in ancient cultures, guarded like weapons, their telling restricted by priests or executioners. Whishdom slots into this lineage too neatly, something hidden not because of what it says, but because of what it does. A story dangerous not in content, but in consequence. And here the suspicion deepens into obsession. If Whishdom were nothing more than a glitch, a hoax, a forgotten meme, why erase it with such precision? Why devote resources to burying its name, scrubbing its traces, and silencing those who pursue it? Each deletion feels less like the natural death of internet clutter, and more like the tightening of a noose around a truth that should never be spoken. The question that lingers is not whether Whishdom exists, but whether we were ever meant to know it in the first place. The final voices are never clear, never whole. They arrive in fragments, words half erased, sentences breaking off into silence as though the act of writing itself became unbearable. These posts do not read like ordinary confessions. They feel weighted, as if the writer was straining against something pulling them away, as if every keystroke carried the drag of exhaustion. The most chilling claim comes from those who insist they found it, the full text of Whishdom. But their words do not describe a discovery. They describe an arrival. As if Whishdom is not just a story you consume, but a threshold you cross, a place that does not allow everyone to return. One testimony repeats in whispers across the years, scattered under different usernames, scattered across forums long abandoned. I found it. You don't want this. The ending is you. The phrasing never changes, even as decades pass. It's as though a single voice is dictating through many hands, like an echo carrying itself forward through different hosts. Accounts vanish, IP addresses dissolve into disconnected logs, but the words survive. They always survive. In the abandoned archives, a darker pattern surfaces. File names buried in corrupted directories carry the same titles as missing users, a one-to-one trail connecting vanished individuals with fragments of Whishdom itself. A folder named after a vanished Reddit handle contains nothing but a single, unopenable file. An email chain ends with a file attachment carrying the exact moniker of someone last seen posting about Whishdom before disappearing. The implication sharpens. The story is not only being read, it is collecting its readers. The psychological weight of these fragments grows unbearable when you realize how consistent they are. The same disjointed syntax, the same unfinished thoughts, the same collapsing grammar spilling across multiple eras of the internet. It feels less like individuals describing an experience, and more like a single current writing itself through them. Survivors describe the sensation of losing authorship of their own mind, thoughts that no longer belong to them, dreams arranged into chapters they never intended to write. A narrative predator that does not merely tell its story, but rewrites the human mind to carry it forward. By the time you reach these testimonies, the emotional thread can no longer be untangled from dread. The story has never been entertainment. It has never been a myth. Whishdom is a lure, bait for the curious, a net for the obsessive, a threshold that waits patiently for you to step across. Those who chase it too far don't simply vanish. They are rewritten, absorbed into the text, carried forward as the next echo of its unfinished sentence. And then comes the realization that is hardest to silence. Once you know its name, you have already entered. Whishdom does not wait for consent, it does not pause for hesitation. Its story begins the moment you hear of it. Every word you've read has already set the rhythm in motion. The question is no longer whether you'll finish Whishdom, but whether Whishdom will finish you.